Good morning, everyone. I'm David Barish, Chairman of the Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board. As always, I ask people to put their cell phones on silent, so I ought to do that too. Today, with us today, Fred Strathmeyer, representing Russell Redding, Secretary, Department of Agriculture, Jen Langen, representing Joe Torsella, the State Treasurer, and our newest addition to the board, Sue Layton, representing Secretary of Revenue, Dan Hassel. Welcome, Sue, and thank you all for coming. A quorum of the board being present, I'll call proceedings to order. First order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Today we have a public hearing pertaining to Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association's petition to modify the gaming floor at the Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. See, everyone's here. I just, again, remind everyone who's going to speak today to make sure they state and spell your name for the court reporter prior to your presentation. And additionally, I would direct that all non-attorney witnesses or potential witnesses please stand at this time to be sworn. Thank you. Petitioners can proceed.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, ex officio members. Thank you for having us. My name is Michael Fabius of the law firm Ballard Spahr, representing Penn National Racecourse, as we seek your approval of a gaming floor modification by removing 315 slot machines. With me today are, to my left, Dan Im, Vice President and General Manager. To his right is John Newman, Vice President of Casino Operations, and to John's right is Alex Vizda, Compliance Manager at Penn National Racecourse. Broadly speaking, we're here today because the demand for the slot machines on the gaming floor at Penn National does not reach the supply of the slot machines at the gaming floor, and we can save some expenses in the maintenance and operation of those slot machines by removing 315 machines without a meaningful impact in the performance of slot revenue. Before I turn it over to Dan to give some of the data underlying that conclusion, I just want to thank the staff for reviewing all of the calendar year 2017 slot revenue performance. You have in your papers a report from FIU, the findings of which we're in material agreement with. So with that, I will turn it over to Dan.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, staff. Good morning, Commission. My name is Dan Im, I-H-M, Vice President, General Manager of Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. So we have a very short presentation that we'd like to present this morning, and it's regarding the reduction of our gaming floor of about 315 slot machines. So as I go into this, I'm just going to give a brief history, kind of where we are, and then we can kind of get into some of the rationale, the reasoning behind the 315 game removal. So if we go back into 2010, 2010 was our highest gross terminal revenue year. We did a little over $253 million during that time frame. Over the course from 2010, we've seen that gross terminal revenue decline for many reasons: market saturation, market condition changes. So in the last couple of years, we've actually seen more of a stabilization in gross terminal revenue. We've been producing around $209 million in revenue. So what I would like to do is kind of talk a little bit about opening 2008. So in 2008, we started the operation with a little under 2,500 slot machines. Presently, we're at 2,317 machines. And again, part of that reduction has just been based on the fact that our gross terminal revenue has declined since 2010. So as we get into the slide deck, we'll be talking a little bit about the removal of the 315 games, but I want to just make a note now, and I'm sure we'll say it many times today. But we believe that the 315 game removal will not have a negative impact on our gross terminal revenue. So with that said, I'll turn it over to John.
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, and staff. My name is John Newman, N-E-W-M-A-N. It's N-E-W-M-A-N, I'm sorry, yes. Vice President of Casino Operations at Hollywood Casino at Penn National Racecourse. I just wanted to talk briefly about what we do at Hollywood Casino in terms of how we operate our business in terms of investments and also our marketing initiatives for Hollywood Casino. When you look at our investments specific to slot capital, since 2009, we've invested $34 million in slot capital alone. $30 million of that, which was approximately 1,300 new slot cabinets, were purchased during that period of time, as well as an additional $4 million, or about 1,500 slot performance conversions were completed during that period of time as well. So we do regularly invest quite a bit of money in capital and refurbishment of our slot product. That includes $1.2 million in budgeted capital for 2018, which we're right now in the process of completing as well. And along with the new cabinets and conversions, we also continue to look at upgrading our furniture and fixtures within the slot areas. So that's part of our investment as well on the gaming floor. From the marketing perspective, we stay very busy. Annually, we spend about $3 million in our budget to promote the property as well as the slot product, including drawings, giveaways. We do run tournaments. We host VIP parties, all part of our goal to promote the product and property and to bring our guests into the property. We had also hold slot premieres. A slot premiere is nothing more than, well, it's what we call an unveiling of the slot machine. So when we install new slot machines on the floor, what we do is we invite our guests in, a select group of guests to come in, and we'll ask them to be the first to play the slot machines. So we'll have those areas roped off. We'll invite guests in, and it's a great opportunity for guests to interact amongst themselves and also get the opportunity to play a brand new machine on the gaming floor. We've had 3 of those so far this year. One of them, we're proud to say, we introduced the new incredible technology slot machine, which is brand new to the Pennsylvania market. We were the first to market at Hollywood Casino this year with that product, and all these unveilings went very well for us and are great opportunities for us to promote that product. Along with that, we also do a little segment what we call Hot Slots with Jeff. Jeff Burnt is our slot operations manager, and he does a neat little video where he'll do informative videos where we will team with marketing and we'll put links to those videos onto social media, and it really gives our guests an opportunity to take a look at what's going on the gaming floor in terms of new product and maybe some instructional videos as well. And there is a link, I think,
We have
Michael, that maybe we can
one
just
short
play
video
that.
here we'll give you a flavor of.
Hi, welcome back to Hollywood Casino Penn National Racecourse. My name is Jeff, and today I'm going to introduce you to some more of our wonderful new slot machines on our casino floor. So sit back and relax and get ready to learn. So this is our Wild Fury Jackpot games at Bravo 19. These are IGT Crystal Curves, the first slot machine on our floor with an ultra-high definition 4K resolution screen. The 43-inch touchscreen is beautifully sharp and clear and is on the cutting edge of gaming technology. A dynamic player panel provides a touchscreen button panel with dual bash buttons, and there is an external USB charging port for your convenience. Wild Fury Jackpots is a 60-line penny game featuring stacked wilds and a 5-level jackpot that is awarded through the free games bonus. During the free games bonus, you can collect wild symbols and move up the jackpot ladder and win larger jackpot amounts. Level up and double level up symbols increase jackpot amounts, and additional free games can be awarded as well. The jackpot levels increase as more is wagered, allowing for bigger hits and more excitement. So next time you're at Hollywood Casino, come on by Bravo 19 and check out the IGT Crystal Curve Wild Fury Jackpot machines and have some fun.
So I hope you can see through this little demonstration of what we've done in terms of our capital investment and also the promotions and marketing efforts that we try very hard on a regular basis to make sure our floor is fresh and that our guests are aware of the product that we offer for them. Thank you.
So this is Dan Im again, IHM. So what I want to talk a little bit about now is the oversupply and the underutilization in terms of our occupancy for our current game floor selection. So on the slide, you'll see on the left, that represents 2017. This is our top 5 highest average hourly coin-ins. So these all happen to be on a Friday. This is by hour, so we're looking at just a 7 o'clock time frame or an 8 o'clock time frame. So you can see on our highest coin-in days, which are a little over $1 million on all those days, the highest occupancy on our gaming floor or utilization was a little over 72%. So what really that says is around 3 out of every 10 slot machines on the gaming floor were not being utilized, or approximately 700 games during that peak period. And again, these are the 5 highest peak coin-in hours that we've had throughout the entire year of 2017. On the right, which is really more of an average, gives you an idea of the first graph is weekday, which is a Wednesday, which is our highest weekday occupancy. We run around a little over 15% occupancy on average on Wednesdays. Yes.
Just define occupancy, please.
It's people playing machines, people sitting at the game, so whether it's rated or unrated.
Thank you.
On weekends, which is a Saturday, our highest occupancy average is a little over 30%. And then if you look at more broad-based annually for 2017, our entire floor for the year, we average a little over 18% utilization or occupancy during that time frame. So if we want to go into the next slide, talk a little bit about the request for the reduction of the 315 games. These 315 games are the oldest, least performing, and least desired machines on our floor. So to give you a little bit of stats, those 315 games, on average, they're about 7.5 years old. On average, their occupancy is about 6.25%, and their performance is around $600 coin-in, that's per day. Win per unit on those games are around $70, win per unit per game, which is well below the house average that we have on our floor, which is approximately around $250. So they are in the bottom quartile of our performance on our entire gaming floor. So by removing these 315 games, I wanted to point out some of the effects. So we, first of all, as I indicated earlier in my conversation, we do not believe by removing these games, because of all of these characteristics being the age of the game, but more importantly, the coin-in per day, and also the lack of occupancy, 6.25%. They're just not desired games on the floor, and they're not being utilized. We believe that staffing levels will not be changed by removing these 315 games. We have no changes in surveillance. We are still and will remain the 7th highest slot machine provider in the state of PA for the property. And that will bring us to 2,002 slot machines after the removal of the 315. And then, as Michael indicated earlier in the opening remarks, we will see some cost savings. We estimate around $75,000 per year. But again, it's really that's not the reason for the removal of the games. The removal of the games is really just to right-size our property. We believe not only will we not see a decrease in any gross terminal revenue from the removal because they're just not being played, but we also do have other like cabinets and other like themes throughout the property. So if there was a certain player that liked a specific game and it was being removed of one of these 315, we believe that we have plenty of other product on the gaming floor that are very similar to the games that they were playing. Some exactly the same games they were playing, just in a different location. So we don't feel like we'll be losing any revenue. We feel like those players, the minimum number of players that play these games, will just find another resource or another game to play on the floor. So we don't see any loss of terminal revenue. So John, so what John's going to do is just show you kind of before we open up for questions, kind of show you a brief of what the gaming floor looks like with the full 2,317, and then also look at what's the gaming floor going to look like afterwards. And again, by the removal, by right-sizing the floor, we also feel like it could provide more comfort level to our guests by opening up some aisles and creating some more space, which in turn might even create more gross terminal revenue by increasing time on device, just because it's a more comfortable environment. So, John?
John Newman again, NEWMAN. Thank you. I apologize in advance. The floor plans here are rather small, but I just wanted to give you, for reference purposes, the next two slides would show you. The first slide actually would be the current gaming floor as it stands right now. On that current gaming floor, you would see some very small little blocks highlighted in red and also in green, or the magenta. Red would be those locations which we would be removing from the floor, and then green locations are just smaller reconfigurations within those areas as well. And on the second page, actually would show the gaming floor with those locations completely removed. To Dan's point, in a lot of cases, these locations are in tight areas as they are right now, so by removing those locations, we'd be able to free up and have our guests be able to egress through those areas a lot more efficiently than they are now and create a more comfortable environment. Upon approval, should we get approval to do that, we'd expect that this project would take us approximately 120 days to complete. And the reason for that is we wouldn't want to go on the gaming floor and cause a lot of disruption to where it might impact our guests in a negative manner. One thing we've learned over many years is that disruption is not good for business. So we want to take this project and do it in a very orderly fashion with minimal guest interruption. And for that reason, we would believe it would take us approximately up to 120 days to complete that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan, John. Before we close our presentation and take your questions, I just thought it's helpful to try and encapsulate a sense of scale. And if we, Dan spoke this before on slide 5. We look at these 5 highest peak hours. The occupancy rate, which, ranges from 68 to 72. If you just take that in the middle and call it 70%. 70% of the current slot count, 2317, with my lawyer math, is 1,622 slot machines. So there's about 700, which Dan said, extra. We're seeking to remove less than half of that. If you approve the petition and we reduce our slot count to 2002, you take that same number, 1,622 slot machines, 1,622 out of 2002 is 81% occupancy. That number tells me 2 things. First of all, there's too many slot machines on the floor right now. And secondly, there's still room for growth. We have every intention and every incentive to do what we can to fill that remaining 20% and try and take that 81 to 90 on a peak hour. And we know that that's important to our business purpose to maximize our slot machine revenue. And we also recognize the importance to the Commonwealth, to the Gaming Control Board, and to the Racing Commission to maximize slot revenue, particularly the Racing Commission, because we know the portion of the tax revenue supports the racing industry, supports the racing activities at Penn National. So that remains a priority to us. But we do feel that there's sufficient capacity even after the removal to serve that need and maximize the revenue. So with that, we'll take any questions from the board and from OEC if they have any.
At this point, I'll turn to Enforcement Counsel for any presentation or questioning you have.
All right. Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Tamara Haken, Haken, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. We do have several questions for the petitioners at this time. When do you anticipate full completion of the modification? You mentioned 120 days. When, date-wise, would you anticipate that completion occurring?
Depending on when we actually got the approval, we would expect to start this in mid-May,
Okay.
and it would be 120 days for completion from that time.
Do you anticipate this change affecting minimum staffing schedules at all?
No, we do not.
Okay. And will the modification require any electrical wiring changes where there are vacated spots?
There will be vacated spots where we'll have to have our facilities department make sure that they cover the receptacle holes, pull back all the network wiring, and then place carpeting, patches of carpeting. In a lot of cases, the carpet's already under the bases. Obviously, it's just a matter of folding the carpet back over, and we'd be good to go there.
Okay.
Yes.
Are any progressive slot machines on the list to be terminated?
There are a few. I don't know exactly how many there are, though.
And I want to confirm that you are aware that you must submit all the necessary information and documentation to the Bureau of Casino Compliance in regards to transferring progressive liability.
Absolutely, yes.
I want to confirm on the record that the slot reduction is not requested to make room for any additional table games at Hollywood Casino.
That's correct.
And also, nor is it to lessen the burden in Mountain View's overall slot complement in order to accommodate its Category 4 facilities in the future.
That's correct.
OEC has no further questions at this time, and the Office of Enforcement Counsel does not have a formal presentation. However, it should be noted that we filed an answer to the present amended and restated petition to modify a gaming floor, and the answer included a Financial Investigations Unit summary report attached as an exhibit, which outlines and provides an analysis of the financial implications of the requested slot machine reduction. Our assessment of this matter indicates that there are no substantial issues, and the slot machines being removed are among the poorest performing slots on the Hollywood Casino floor. As a result, petitioner's request in this instance is reasonable and within the appropriate confines of the Act. Should the present modification to the gaming floor be approved by the board, OEC requests that the board make any such approval subject to the conditions set forth in OEC's answer in order that we may continue to monitor the change as it moves forward to ensure full compliance with the Act and all applicable regulations. Subject to those conditions set forth in the pleadings, OEC has no objection to the amended and restated petition of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association to modify their gaming floor in the manner described.
Thank you.
We'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do you have any response at this point to anything that the council
No.
has said?
No response to anything that OEC said.
I'm going to open this up to questions, but I have just some, myself, two clarifying questions, which may clear out some of the underbrush. You make the point that you're removing the oldest games and the least well-performing games. I would expect nothing else. But since in a way, that's a bit of a red herring. The question I've got is, have you considered replacing these poor-performing games with better-performing games? Why is the assumption that getting these poor-performing games off the floor because they're 7 years old and all the rest of it helps, as opposed to replacing those games with the latest and greatest games?
Well, I'll touch on a little bit and let my colleagues respond more, but I think the answer is simply it's just an oversupply issue. We don't have the demand for those games. So as John indicated, we are doing what you proposed. Last year we spent $1.3 million, this year another $1.3 million on bringing in new cabinets and new game themes. So we are replacing games, as you indicated, throughout the year. But again, this is just a lack of demand, lack of.
Well, quite honestly, I asked the question, I knew the answer, but I would think if anybody happened to be watching this, they'd be going, well, what other games would you pull off the floor? Your high-performing games? Right. Obviously, you're going to take the least-performing games off. And I just want you to make a clear statement here.
Yes.
That what's really going on here is you have plenty of updating of your games. These are the ones that, the first, it's like triage. It's the first ones to go, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And the other thing is, in terms of locations of where games are being pulled from, this board is very aware of the occasional controversy about smoking and non-smoking areas of the floor. Would somebody speak to how that's going to be handled here?
Yeah, so with the movement of the games, there will be no changes as to the footprint in terms of square footage that we allow for gaming or smoking versus non-smoking. So currently, and then after the removal, will stay the same in terms of square footage. So right now we have 45% of our floor in terms of square footage is smoking. The other 55% is non-smoking on a square footage basis. So if we were going into the actual counts of games, number of games in each of those areas, I can give you a current and I can give you where we'll end up.
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
So currently now we have 1,217 games in smoking, which is about 52.52%. The other 1,100, or 47.48%, is in non-smoking. These are the physical machines.
Mm-hmm.
When we make the transition, if approved, for the 315 removal,
I'm sorry, can you give me the last number again?
yes, the last number is 1,100 non-smoking, or 47.48%.
Thanks.
The after the removal, proposed removal, we will be at 1,156 games that are smoking, or 57.74%, and 846 non-smoking, or 42.26%. So based on that, you'll see that the majority of the games being removed are coming in off the non-smoking area of the facility, and it's just it is what it is. It's just those are unfortunately the lowest performing games on our floor reside in those areas.
Just want to ask a question to counsel.
Yes.
Obviously, when I need legal advice, I'll ask my own counsel. But
I'm always available.
in your interpretation of the statute, it's square footage that matters, not the number of games?
That's correct. That's my read of it.
Okay. Questions from the board or ex officio members?
I have a question. You talked about, sir, about market saturation. That's not a self-defining point. I'm interested in your elaborating more on market saturation. Because interestingly enough, on your bids, you have shored up, if I understand things strategically, kind of a defensive posture, which has saturated and may reduce, I think, maybe some of the folks that come into Hollywood, they're going to stop a little sooner at one of the minis. So I'm trying to balance everything. But let's talk about market saturation over time, how you define it, and how you think it has played out. I see diminishing numbers, but I want to get behind that a little bit.
Yeah, I think I think what we've seen over the course of since 2010, we've seen gross terminal revenues steadily decline. I think we're at a point now, just based on the changes in the marketplace in terms of new competition, the economy, different variables. I think in the last several years we've seen that stabilize, where we've seen that revenue at about $209 million. And I would say that this year we'd probably anticipate that being around the same. So I think we've seen things stable off. You're absolutely correct. There's going to be another shift next year, possibly, when the Category 4s start to emerge and start to come up. And again, we'll have to come, deal with that when that happens. And I think part of Penn's strategy as a defensive move was to help our current business here in Grantville, so we don't lose as much business and try to be as stable as we can. And obviously, as markets change, we have to be more aware of the marketplace and the conditions and be more aggressive and look for other opportunities to drive more revenue and visitation into our property.
You made a heck of an investment, both in bid and what's going to be required to fulfill the object of the successful bid. And be interested to see what your ROI is going to be for the entire enterprise, let's say, within the two and plus the Hollywood one. It's a lot of money you are investing to do that, to shore it up.
Yeah, Penn is definitely committed to the state and PA, so, and that's part of the commitment, and obviously we want to, we're interested in seeing how it all falls out as well.
Now, table games comes in, of course, in 210, so that adds to your arsenal of things to offer to your guests. What effect has that had on the slots? That's had an effect, I'm sure, on the slots.
Yeah, it has. It has had a little effect. It's also, I think, helped. It's also helped the slot market. You know, what we're seeing now in terms of trends, if anything, we're seeing, you know, part of the decline in revenue. It's not necessarily coming from the table game side. We're seeing the table game business is pretty steady and very strong. We're seeing some reductions on the slot side.
Okay, thank you very much.
Kathy.
Thank you. Just a little bit of follow-up on both the chairman and Mr. Jules' questions. So when Office of Enforcement Counsel asked about whether or not this reduction was making room for table games or Cat 4, and your answer was no, the reason behind that question is because our statutory guidance tells us that that is something that we need to consider when you ask for a reduction of machines that takes you below what you had on the floor in 2010 when table games first came in. And your ask today is taking you below what you had on the floor in 2010. So I'm looking at your history where you showed us the gross terminal revenue and slot machine count, and seeing kind of that peak of slot machines right at or before the introduction of table games, and a fall off between 2010 and 2014 before it stabilized. Is it fair for me to assume that at least the larger drop off from 2010 to 2014 was kind of a readjustment of players who now had another option and preferred to play tables versus slots? Can I draw a conclusion like that, or is that not a proper conclusion?
To some extent, I would agree with that, and I would also say prior to live table games, we offered electronic table games. We had 55 seats out there. So these are classified as slot machines, but they play like an electronic table game, right? So upon opening of the live tables, we did see business move from those electronic table games to the live games, in which case reduced our revenue effectively just in that area alone, which was, I don't have the numbers, but it was pretty substantial for that period of time.
And then from 2014 to the current, in terms of the change out of machines that you've been making, I mean, I've toured a few of the casinos since I've become a commissioner. I noticed that there's a lot of new innovative things. I noticed that there are, it seems, a lot of machines that now act as electronic tables for, or it's electronic version of a table game. I assume those are collecting revenue for the Commonwealth at the slot machine rate, not at the table game rate. Is that a fair, correct conclusion?
There's a few different classifications of those type of units. There's a dealer-assisted table game where a dealer is required to be dealing that game. That's taxed at the effective live table game tax rate. There's also what they call a fully automated table game rate, which is kind of a hybrid between a slot machine and a live table game, where I believe that's a 48% tax rate, which it plays like a live table game, but there's no dealer involved. And then there are others that are strictly still classified as slot machines. I know on our floor, we've got a bank of 10. We call them, they're Vegas Star Roulette. They're roulette machines. They've been there since the beginning, since we've opened. They're still being taxed as a slot machine. And the reason for that is because they don't meet the requirements from a software and hardware perspective to be classified as either a fully automated table game or a live table game, if that makes any sense. I believe on that particular unit, we would have to have for a roulette, we would have to have a dealer if it's going to be live, a live table game, or in the event that it was a fully automated table game, tax rate at 48%, we would have to have a mechanical wheel, at least automated on its own, but it didn't require a dealer, if that makes sense. We have just an electronic display that's running that unit. It's an electronic random number generator, and it's classified as a slot machine. So in that case, they are still slot machines. We're paying 55%, whatever that tax rate is on slots. Yes.
The ones that are not classified as slot machines, are they located in your smoking, your non-smoking, or both sections?
We have
the ones that are that hybrid, or that are mechanical to a certain extent, but have that dealer in the pit, but 55 people could be playing on machines. And if I'm understanding your response, that's considered a table game, and the tax revenue is at a table game. So where are those located?
There are 14 terminals that are located. If you look on that map, when you walk in the main, if you look, we can go back to that map if you'd like. And if you look at either one of them, if you look at the lower portion, that would be the main entrance to the casino, like the valet entrance. And as you walk in, you'll see two gaming pits there. If you walk between those pits, you'll see on that back wall there, about right in the middle of the casino, we have 14 terminals set up. And within these terminals, we have two double podiums. There's a dealer that deal 2 games on each of those podiums. They are live. They are dealer-assisted table games. They are.
Is that what appears to be black?
Yeah, it looks black.
Yes, they are black. You're right.
Thank you.
Yes. Those units are dealer-assisted, so they are taxed at the table games tax rate. Smoking is available on those as table games.
Is non-smoking available to those? It was my question.
We not on those particular games, although we can, with the permission of the gaming board, at any time deem a smoking to be non-smoking if it was to our benefit for the guest.
And at what point, since your read of the statute is that it's the square footage that matters in terms of the allocation of smoking versus non-smoking and compliance with the statute, at what point does, in your view, does the how do I want to articulate this? We're now at a 15% differential between active, with your proposed new changes. You're at a 15% differential between 57 and 42% availability, non-smoking versus smoking. At what point does the argument come that you're kind of just emptying out your availability for non-smoking gaming, and kind of going around the intent of the legislation? Maybe that's the way to say it.
I think I understand the question and the point that you're driving at, and it's an eminently fair question. I don't know that we have a bright line test for you.
I don't know that we do either, but your testimony raises that question about whether we need one.
We're looking at, when we identified the slot machines, the market data, and where is the demand and where is there the lack of the demand, and that's what's dictating the machines that we've identified. The data clearly reflects that there's lower demand on the non-smoking side, and so that's driving our business decision.
And I could appreciate that to a certain extent. It does circle me back to the chairman's original question, which is, as a regulator trying to evaluate this, and clearly you know your market better than I any of us do, but it still does raise the question of, well, if in your testimony you're telling us that the games that you're taking out are the oldest and tiredest games, then, and you're taking them out of the non-smoking section, part of me wonders if the non-smoking section has the newest and most exciting games, and if folks would both want to play there, and that we wouldn't be making as much of a risk of losing, what is important to the Commonwealth too, the revenue to the Commonwealth, if we were putting the newest and brightest and fanciest and the stuff that people really like in those sections.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, well, I can assure you that that's not the case. We have some of our highest win per unit games, some of our newest games, and I know John could probably tell you what those games are and what the win per unit on those games are, but some of those games are 3-4 times house average win per unit, and those are located in the non-smoking sections. I would also tell you that we have games, and I think I mentioned it earlier, we have similar themes and cabinets that we're removing from the non-smoking area of the 315 that reside in the smoking area. So they still are games that are 7-8 years old, but they're performing at a rate that they did not fall into that lower 315 quadrant because they're just performing better games. So this exercise, I can tell you, it's I mean, we have the statistics as it relates to smoking versus non-smoking, but that was not a factor into this. It was merely looking at, we have an oversupply of games. We want to right-size our facility, and where are our lowest performing slot machines at, and those are the games that we identified.
You said it wasn't a factor, but of the 315 slots that are being removed, 254 of them, if my numbers are right, are coming from the non-smoking section, and only 61 from the smoking section. So it's what, 80-20?
Yes.
And you're saying it wasn't a factor?
In the decision process, no, we weren't factoring
Wouldn't be
in
more equitable at all in the.
It was merely, I guess you could say it so happens that the lowest performing machines reside in the non-smoking area. I don't know if that's...
Okay.
If I could add one thing, when we talk about smoking and non-smoking, I think it's very important to also realize that, you know, we're keenly aware of the impact of smoke. Of course, we've maintained a maximum of 45% of the floor as smoking when we could have been at 50%. So literally, we have close to 100,000 square foot casino. We could, if we wanted to, have maximized our floor by going to that extra $5,000 in smoking area, which we haven't done. So the square footage, I believe in a lot of cases, is just as important, if not more important, because when guests that are non-smokers want to come onto the property, they're looking for areas that are non-smoking areas, right? So they want to come to and see the biggest areas that they can find that are non-smoking, which we constantly look to preserve and grow. And we don't really get as hung up as much on the individual machines per se as we do those areas. So we've been working, diligently over the years in trying to, satisfy the needs of the non-smokers, obviously, and so that's something I think should be taken in consideration when we're talking about that square footage, the size of those areas on the floor.
Commissioner Logan, did you have other questions?
No, that's it. Thanks.
I think there are no questions here. I think ex officios.
I think this is on. Thank you, Chairman Barish. This is a statement made on behalf of Secretary Redding. We all recognize the symbiotic relationship between agriculture, the promotion of horse breeding programs, open spaces, the horse racing industry, and gaming. we only have to look at the primary objectives of the 2004 Racehorse Development and Gaming Act. As the slot machine sector of the gaming industry in Pennsylvania matures, Secretary Redding, who is also the chairman of the State Horse Racing Commission, would like to express his concern regarding the potential impact the ongoing reduction of slot machines may ultimately have on gross terminal revenue and the Pennsylvania Horse Race Development Fund. Secretary Redding would hope that casinos who operate slot machines make every effort to rejuvenate, replace, relocate, and remarket slot machines. The default position must not always be removal of slot machines from the casino floor when there are other potential alternatives. As Pennsylvania moves forward with every expanding gaming opportunities, the Secretary would like to remind everyone of the positive impact that gaming has had on live horse racing, entertainment, economic development, and the employment in the Commonwealth. Thank you, Chairman Barish.
Thank you. Jen, did you have a question?
No.
I want to thank you for your appearance today, and we're going to take up a vote on this matter later this morning in the Office of Chief Counsel's section of the agenda.
May I, as a housekeeping measure, just move the PowerPoint into the evidence?
Fine, so moved.
Thank you.
Also, just for clarification on the record, I didn't see an answer by OEC to their motion to protect confidential information. Is there any objection to that?
No, there was an answer that was also confidential submitted
Okay.
as well.
Okay.
I just realized I did have one, not so much a question as a kind of follow-up statement. I was listening to Commissioner Mandarino's follow-ups on my questions, and I kind of feel like Justice Black or something on the Supreme Court. I'll know it when I see it. But 4257 is one number. But, you know, we end up in a situation, I don't know where that red line is either, but I guarantee you there is a line there where we're passing by legislative intent. And this is a comment both to you and to the rest of the casino industry. Somebody comes in here and basically somebody's going to come in here and say, I'll have 50% of my floor, but only 20% of my slot machines are going to be in the non-smoking area. One way or another, there's going to be a challenge, whether it's by administrative action of this board or by some other complainant. And the trend is a troublesome one. Because I think the square footage was a shorthand of a way to how to talk about it without unduly restricting casinos in terms of exactly where they place their machines. And whether it's 41%, 35 or 25 or 10, I have no idea. But I cannot imagine that the legislature intended to have square footage and have it disproportionately balanced so that people could basically keep all their best games and all their most activities in the smoking part and effectively, in my opinion, potentially end run around the legislative intent. That's more just of a statement. And I think it's something we're going to have to take a closer look at as we move forward. But again, I do want, if you have a response, fine, but otherwise, thank you for your appearance today.
No argument on my point. I would just say thank you for the comments. I mean, the industry pays attention to the comments that are made at each other's petitions, and we hear these comments and we take them into account. So we appreciate it when you express your views.
That's my view.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the board's view is another question, but I do see a potential. I wouldn't want to go too far down that road before we end up talking about what was the intent of the General Assembly. And I think we'll just leave it at that for now, unless anybody else has any other comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
By way of announcements, the board held executive session yesterday, May 1st, to discuss personnel matters and to conduct quasi-judicial deliberations relating to matters being considered by the board today. Additionally, we held a second executive, next, we have consideration of a motion to approve the minutes and transcripts of the February 8th and March 21st meetings. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the minutes and transcripts of the February 8th and March 21st, 2018 meetings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Kevin O'Toole. Morning, Kevin.
Good morning, Chairman Barish. Good morning, members of the board. I'm pleased to report this morning information that we included in a press release earlier this week, that with the gambling expansion initiatives, we have reached the point where one of those initiatives will be bringing tax revenue into the Commonwealth, and that is fantasy sports contests. So as reported in our press release, we received 6 application submissions from operators. And I want to supplement that press release this morning by indicating that a 7th operator has submitted a timely application. Their submission was postmarked on or before April 27th of 2018. So in addition to the 6 that were identified in the press release, Star Street, Fantasy Football Players Championship, FanDuel, DraftKings, Boom Fantasy, and Fast Pick, we also have the entity identified as Sports Hub Technologies. So at the current time, we have 7 operators of fantasy sports contests. So as indicated, effective Saturday, April 28th, 2018, the operators became obligated to remit a 15% tax on gross fantasy contest revenues obtained from entry fees received from players. This tax revenue is remitted to the Department of Revenue on a monthly basis and is applied to the general fund. I would also like to indicate that within these submissions are quite a few pieces of information that are compliant with the Act and compliant with our regulations. And our board staff is currently reviewing the internal control procedures and accounting controls submitted by these fantasy sports contest operators to ensure that various protections are in place. And just a few of those that I would like to note are, number 1, age and identity verification of account holders, username and password protections for account holders, adequate procedures to ensure the confidentiality of the information provided by account holders, procedures that would allow account holders to restrict themselves from playing, procedures that allow account holders to restrict the amount of their deposits and the length of time that they play, and certainly procedures in place for recording accurately fantasy sports contests, adjusted revenue and taxation. And the final point is, as with all of the expanded gambling initiatives, there is a portion of the tax revenue that is allocated to the Department of Drug and Alcohol Programs for purposes of assisting the funding of compulsive and problem gambling treatment and awareness programs. So that concludes my report this morning. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. Any questions or comments from the board on that? If not, we move ahead to Human Resources, our new director, Danette Bixler-George. Morning.
Morning, Chairman, board members. The Office of Human Resources has one motion for your consideration today relative to the hiring of 2 individuals. First, Felisa LaRoque has been selected as a compliance examiner in the Bureau of Gaming Operations. Ms. LaRoque has completed the interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by the Director of Gaming Operations, Paul Resch. Second is Sean Fleming, who has been selected as an investigator in the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement. Mr. Fleming has completed the interview process, background investigation, and drug screening, and is recommended for hire by the Bureau of Investigation Enforcement's Deputy Director, Michelle Seo. Unless you have questions, I ask the board consider a motion to approve the hiring actions as indicated.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Danette this time? If not, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applicants for hire as proposed by the Human Resources Director.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thanks, Danette.
Thank you.
Doug? Doug Sherman, Chief Counsel.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. There's just one petition before you for consideration today, and that's the petition of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, which you heard just a few minutes ago. In addition to the presentation today and the PowerPoint that was moved into evidence, the board has, in advance of this meeting, been provided with all the documents filed of record in that matter. Mountain View, of course, is requesting to remove 315 machines from its floor, which would take the complement from 2,317 to 2002. If approved, the Office of Enforcement Counsel has proposed a number of conditions which were outlined in their answer, all of which would be appropriate to impose in this case. Additionally, Mountain View has requested that the exhibits attached to its petition be maintained as confidential, and there's no objection to that request. Therefore, the matter is now ready for the board's decision.
Prior to a vote on that, are any further comments or anybody on the board wishes to make? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the petition of Mountain View Thoroughbred Racing Association, LLC, to modify its gaming floor plan with the conditions requested by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that the petitioner's request for confidentiality be granted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, presenting reports and recommendations is Deputy Chief Counsel Steve Cook.
Morning.
Morning, Steve.
Next before the board for consideration are 4 reports and recommendations received from the Office of Hearings and Appeals. In each matter, the person who's the subject of the report and recommendation received notice that the board would be taking the matter up today, and that they had the right to come forward and briefly address the board. Additionally, prior to today, the board has received the report and recommendation and the complete evidentiary record. If any of these persons are present today, I'd ask them to come forward when their matter is called. The first report and recommendation pertains to Michael Booth. On October 19th, 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition requesting that Mr. Booth be placed on the board's involuntary exclusion list, alleging that in August of 2017, while gaming at the Mount Airy Casino Resort, Mr. Booth capped blackjack wagers on 2 occasions, unlawfully winning $300. As a result of his conduct, he was charged with theft-related offenses, and these criminal charges remain pending. Mr. Booth requested a hearing, which was held on January 23, 2018. The Office of Enforcement Counsel attended that hearing and put evidence into the record. Mr. Booth, however, failed to attend the hearing, and as a result, the hearing officer based his decision only upon the evidence submitted by Enforcement Counsel. The report and recommendation issued by that hearing officer recommends that Mr. Booth be placed on the exclusion list, and that is the recommendation before the board.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Michael Booth's placement on the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter before the board pertains to Tawan Dang. Mr. Dang was issued a gaming employee occupation permit in June of 2016 and worked as a table games dealer at Harrah's, Philadelphia. On January 12, 2018, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for an emergency suspension of Mr. Dang's gaming permit after receiving notice that Mr. Dang was charged with numerous theft-related offenses. Specifically, it was alleged that in December of 2017, Mr. Dang, along with other table games staff at Harrah's, conspired with numerous patrons to cheat, depriving Harrah's of a significant amount of revenue. It is estimated that the scheme resulted in a loss to Harrah's of over $761,000. As a result of these allegations, the board's executive director entered an emergency suspension and a hearing on the suspension was scheduled. The hearing was held on February 6, 2018. Mr. Dang did not attend the hearing. The Office of Enforcement Counsel did attend and put in evidence of the conspiracy and criminal charges. And as a result of that evidence, the hearing officer recommends that the suspension continue.
Questions or comments from the board? We have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the suspension of Tuan Dang's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter to be heard by the board today is the report and recommendation pertaining to John Joseph Timar. I would note for the record that Mr. Timar and his counsel are present, and I believe they wish to address the board. I'd ask them to come forward at this time. While they're doing that, I will provide the board with a brief summary. Mr. Timar was issued a gaming employee permit in May of 2011 and worked as a table games dealer at Sands Bethworks until his termination in March of 2016. On May 5th of 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to revoke Mr. Timar's gaming employee occupation permit. The complaint alleges that between March 13th of 2016 and March 20th of 2016, while dealing poker at Sands, Mr. Timar concealed chips and placed them in his tote box. The total amount taken by Mr. Timar over this 7-day period was $143. There were no criminal charges filed as a result of this incident, but Sands did terminate Mr. Timar's employment. A hearing in this matter was requested, and after several continuances, it was held on January 25th, 2018. The Office of Enforcement Counsel, Mr. Timar, and his attorney were present at the hearing, and the parties submitted a joint stipulation of facts. No testimony was taken at the hearing. The Office of Enforcement Counsel did, however, submit video surveillance as evidence. That, in addition to the stipulation of facts submitted, showed that Mr. Timar admitted to the facts alleged by OEC in the revocation complaint and essentially was simply asking for sympathy from the board. I should note for the record that notwithstanding this incident occurred at Sands, Mr. Timar is presently employed at Sugar House as a dealer as of today, I believe, correct?
He's still working there today.
Yep.
He has been since this termination from Sands.
Okay. Those are the facts that were heard by the hearing officer, and the report and recommendation ultimately issued recommended that his license be revoked.
Are there questions from the board? You have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, it's
Yeah.
because we need to have the
Thank you.
person
Sure.
sworn.
Proceed.
Stand up. Raise your right hand.
Yes.
My name is Frank Sluzis, Sluzis, and I'll give you a card after this. Thank you.
You can proceed.
Sir, and members, I guess I should sit down. Members of the board, Mr. Chairman, we are not here obviously to dispute the facts. We entered into a stipulation. What we are here to ask is a second chance. And I can't spout out law. I can't spout out regulation. All I can tell you is that I have a firm belief that we're a society of second chances in everything we do, in life, in love, in business, in sports. There's so many examples of second chances. We had a young man, and he would wish to, after I give my brief presentation, he would like to address the board. We have a young man who has made a mistake, perhaps swayed by a wrong crowd, who has stepped up to the plate, so to speak, accepted responsibility. Now, of course, there were some delays, and I'm going to mea culpa. If there's any adverse inference to that, please blame me as counsel. There was an answer filed because when I looked at the rules and regulations, it was my conclusion that a reply should have been filed, which I did. Some of the delay happened to be because I had court in other jurisdictions. But ultimately, we resolved the case with respect to the factual scenario by stipulation. Now, I know it's an evidentiary matter. However, we were under the impression that we could present some mitigation here today at the board. And I have 4 letters from supervisors and co-workers at his present place of employment in support of Mr. Timar. Now, of course, as an officer of the court, I can't authenticate these. I did not speak to these people. They were supplied. So with that in mind, I know there may be an objection with respect to how...
Hand him the summary. Let me see.
I had given them to
I've
him.
looked over. Mr. Sluzis gave them.
I have enough for all of the members of the board. If you would so be kind to take a look at.
Continue, we'll deal with that
sorry?
issue. Continue presentation before we deal with that.
Sure. That's it for me, Mr. Chairman. I would just like the opportunity to let Mr. Timar speak on his own behalf.
In a moment, we certainly will do that. Counsel?
The letters are, as counsel indicated, they're basically 4 letters of recommendation from various employees of Sugar House, 1 or 2 supervisory, I think, and 1 or 2 co-workers that I'll vouch for this gentleman.
Okay. We should make a presentation. Please proceed.
Hello, my name is John Timar, T-I-M-A-R. I was just my thing. I started dealing at, I started poker at Sands. Didn't really know anything. Just decided to give it a shot. Wasn't working out too well. Was getting yelled at, making mistakes and everything. Wasn't making a lot of money. So I went to my coworkers and, I've seen they made a lot of money, but I confided in the wrong people. The way they told me to make money wasn't the honest making money, trying to, work as fast as you can and all that. So, I did that wrong. And
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yes, you got
I
it.
want to make sure I understand what you
Okay.
just said. You went and spoke to other people that worked at your casino?
Just coworkers to see
Asked
how,
them how to make more money?
just how to get to there in how to make more money, because I wasn't making anything. I was, messing up and doing all that. So I
Continue, I'm sorry.
Okay. So, as you can see, that didn't work out, and I definitely have learned my lesson with that. I taught myself how to learn, do poker and all that, and it did weigh heavy on me. And when I talked to family members and all that, my grandmother said, you didn't earn that money, so do the right thing with it. So it was like $145, $150, and I times it by 2. Gave half to the SPCA, which is for animals, and then another $145 to the Jimmy B Foundation, which is for cancer. I have been working. I did get a second chance, which a lot of people don't. I've been working for over 2 years at Sugar House Casino as a poker dealer. I haven't had one ding on my record. I haven't had one problem there. I try to mentor the new dealers to show them down the road, not to do what I did. I love my job. I just, I've been given awards for customer service. I've helped out in the community and all that at Chop Medical House to, for all this, and just been trying to do the right thing. And I just wish you guys would give me to keep working, and I appreciate you guys having me today.
I've just one question before I see what everybody else wants to do here. Did you get the job at the second casino after you were fired at the first casino?
Correct.
Does your current employer know about your difficulties?
The ones that I've talked to, not everybody there.
When you applied for that job, did you tell them that you had been fired from the other casino for stealing money?
I said I was just let go. I was not because everything was going on. Yeah, I did not.
So your current employer, at least prior to this morning, has no idea that they hired somebody who'd been fired by another casino for stealing money.
No, but I put all my I put that I worked there and all that and everything for if they wanted to call and that.
I see.
The letters that you have with you today, I just want to understand who they are from. It says that a couple of them are from supervisors. I don't exactly know what that means. Does somebody in the HR department at Sugar House know, as we sit here today, that you had been let go from another casino for cheating while dealing at the table? And are they willing to keep you on as an employee, or is that something you don't know as you sit here today?
One of my last, I asked about like the suspension thing, and they said they could, if you talk to like, if I talk to the head boss, which I have his email, if I would get like suspended like a month, or I don't know how it works. I talked to him about it, and he said I would have to go through the poker room manager.
Okay, so as we sit here today, you actually don't know what effect your being before us today, or you don't really know whether or not folks higher up in your organization are aware of what happened at, was it Sands, the original? Yes. At Sands. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's correct.
The letters are from poker staff rather than human resources.
You mean the letters of support are from
Letters of
fellow workers at the new casino?
In the poker room, not in human resources.
I understand.
One is a poker supervisor, 2 are identified as shift managers, and I think another one is a co-employee, co-worker.
And that's at the present employer.
I understand. Do we have independent knowledge? I'm looking at counsel here as to what knowledge
We do not,
employer
because
might have.
We are not aware of what Sugar House knows at this point, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I'm aware, yeah.
Let's see. Are there other questions?
Yeah. So, John, when you filled out your application for your current employer,
Yes.
you had to get to some section that indicated, your past
Yeah.
employers. What did you fill out in that section that you just got terminated? You didn't walk me through that.
I just, I said it was 2 years ago. I just put that I worked for like the Sands Casino and all that, and that.
When it said reason why you left, what did you stick there?
I just put I was like, I believe I said I was. I didn't say I was like fired for cheating or any of that.
You said let go.
Correct.
But you put that on your application that you worked there.
Yeah.
Okay. When you obviously had at least one face-to-face interview with somebody?
I had to do like a panel or how they do
Okay,
it.
so there was more than one person.
Yeah, and then after that, if you get past,
Anybody ask about that, said, okay, you worked at this casino and you say you were let go. Did anybody ask about
it
it?
was just questions, and then after that, you had to, after you passed the panel, like they seen you had that, then you just did like the dealing audition after like you passed the panel. So yeah.
Is there a question there?
Did you guys notify Sugar House? Or did during the course of the investigation?
We're not at liberty to notify Sugar House about the background of an individual. We notified Casino Compliance to keep a close watch on Mr. Timor during his employment there. And he, to our knowledge, he has not committed any additional thefts since he's been working at Sugar House.
There are other questions up here?
And it's not a question. It's not a question. I'm sorry. It's not a question. It's just a comment that your attorney, you said it, John, and then the chairman asked a question. This wrong crowd troubles me a little bit. The not making enough money, and you talking to people in the casino who had similar jobs, told you how to make more money. That's really troubling, and I hope it. So, that's it. It was just a comment.
Okay.
If I could, before I turn it over, what's going on here is, and I beat it around the bush, and I think I think you've done it too. I think we've both done it. Did somebody in that casino suggest to you that a good way, one of your fellow workers at your casino suggests to you, at the first casino, that the way to make more money was by stealing money?
By taking like an extra tip, like $1 or so, yes.
That was suggested to you by fellow employees at the first casino?
Yes, people. Yeah, people that I said that I, believed in.
I see.
Okay, I'm.
No, that's good. Now we nailed that down.
Yeah, it just.
I'm glad that you followed up because that nailed down something I wasn't clear on. There were
You understand what you're saying there?
That I was told that cheating's okay.
Okay, just so somebody's listening to that.
No, I didn't.
I used to be the chairman of the Turnpike Commission, and we have toll collectors, okay? And they make X an hour. And that's like somebody saying to another toll collector, the $20 an hour isn't enough. How do we make more? Well, when somebody comes in, you throw this over here, and then you pocket the money. That's, that is just, I'm baffled by it.
If I could, I think there were some questions down here.
How long you been working at Sugar House?
Just about over 2 years.
2 years. And this happened as soon as you got terminated or fired at?
Well, I took time to learn how to deal better and not even, to make everything sharp and not make sure this happened again. Yeah, so it's just over 2 years, no problem, no nothing, no dings or anything. As you can see, nothing.
Just make sure she's
okay. Thank you.
Barrett, did you have a question?
I'm good.
Go ahead.
Don. I just want to be clear, Cyrus. You contacted Casino Compliance at Sugar House, made them aware of Mr. Timor's past transgression, and they kept an eye on him for the last couple of years.
Casino Compliance has been keeping a close watch of him, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Yep. I have a couple of questions in reaction. Too will bring a former life into this as a longtime college president and dealing with young people and understanding the concept of second chances. But I have to put your actions into a context of not only immaturity and criminality, but into the structure of the requirements of the act under which we operate in 204. And that act is rigid as far as its requirements of compliance, of honesty. Mm-hmm. The kind of investigations we do from licensees, even to employees, to gaming service providers, to suppliers, etc., is strong, extraordinary, and important. It's important because the public has to have confidence that the folks who work there, the folks who own the operations, have made this great investment, in fact, are suitable, and there are no problems. And moreover, we are faced up here from time to time with employees who do exactly what you did. A cocktail person putting the tip money in the wrong place, etc. And so we have to understand the concept of deterrence here in even the small things. There's a statement, falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus. I'm always concerned if you're made a mistake, you're wrong in one, you're going to do it again. You've shown you've done it before. You have that capacity. But again, this is all coming down in the context of a very strict statutory requirement of integrity and honesty. And that's what concerns me.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the board? We're going to take a brief executive session recess at this time. We'll reconvene in a few minutes. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, are you coming back to this case?
Yes.
Okay.
See you guys later.
We've completed, I don't know, a 5 or 10 minute break here to consider the case of John Joseph tomorrow. And at this point, I'd like to know, does anybody have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board reject the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding the revocation of John Joseph Timor's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Is there a second to that motion?
Before I second, you better go home and kiss your grandmother for that sound advice. Second.
Any other comments on this matter before we vote?
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to speak to Mr. Timor directly. This board has decided to give you another chance. We're not going to call it a second chance. We're going to call it a last chance. The fact that you came here, presented your case, we appreciate that. The fact that for the last 2 years you've been under the watch of casino compliance at Sugar House and have done nothing else wrong, so we appreciate that. But let me be clear again. We don't want to see you here again. We're giving you your last chance, so we wish you the best. See you later.
Other comments?
No.
The only thing I would add is to recognize the amount of time that this board has taken on this matter. We don't want to see you here again.
I appreciate it.
Okay. Having said that, is there all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
May we be excused?
Yes.
Thank you.
The final report and recommendation before the board today pertains to Sean Riley. Mr. Riley was issued a non-gaming employee registration in August of 2010 and worked as a bartender at the Sugar House Casino. On September 29th of 2017, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a complaint to revoke Mr. Riley's non-gaming employee registration after being notified that on August 17th, 2017, Mr. Riley was involved in a verbal dispute with a customer, which resulted in casino personnel and the Pennsylvania State Police being notified of the incident. Mr. Riley was issued disorderly conduct citation for allegedly acting argumentatively and raising his arm to the trooper who responded to the dispute. This charge was later withdrawn. However, as a result of this incident, Sugar House terminated Mr. Riley's employment. The hearing in this matter was held on February 6, 2018. The Office of Enforcement Counsel appeared offering testimony and documentary evidence, including surveillance video. Mr. Riley received notification of the hearing. However, he contacted the Office of Hearings and Appeals and informed them that he would not be participating. The hearing officer took the evidence presented by OEC, including reviewing the surveillance footage of the incident between Mr. Riley and the customer, as well as the incident between Mr. Riley and the trooper. And although the video has no audio, the hearing officer found that Mr. Riley's conduct did not appear egregious. Rather, the surveillance showed that Mr. Riley's interaction with the patron seemed calm and non-threatening, and that the incident with the trooper was initiated by the trooper first grabbing Mr. Riley's arm. After seeing all this evidence and taking all this evidence into consideration, the hearing officer issued a report and recommendation recommending that the Office of Enforcement Counsel's request for revocation be denied, and Mr. Riley be allowed to maintain his non-gaming registration. This matter is now ready for the board's consideration.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board adopt the report and recommendation issued by the Office of Hearings and Appeals regarding Sean Riley's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Chief Counsel.
Second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And that concludes the matters.
Thank you so
Office of
much.
Chief Counsel.
Sue Hensel, Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Chairman Barash and members of the board. Before the board today will be one slot machine supplier renewal, 900 principal key gaming and non-gaming employee applicants, and one gaming-related gaming service provider qualifier applicant. In addition, there will be the consideration of 3 gaming service provider applicants. The first matter for your consideration is the renewal of the KGM Gaming LLC slot machine supplier license. KGM Gaming is a Pennsylvania-based company that sells and services slot machines and associated equipment in multiple states. The company has been licensed with us since 2006. The Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement has completed its investigation of the company, and the Bureau of Licensing has provided you with a background investigation and suitability report. I have provided you with a draft order and ask that the board consider the order to renew the slot machine supplier license for KGM Gaming LLC.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the renewal of KGM Gaming LLC supplier license as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next is approval of principal, key, and gaming-related gaming service provider licenses and qualifications. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a proposed order for 8 principals, 9 keys, and 1 gaming-related gaming service provider qualifier. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses and qualification.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry.
No problem, I have no objection.
We're on a fast track today.
Believe me, if I objected, you'd hear it.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of principal, key employees and gaming-related service provider qualifier licenses as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Also, there are temporary principal and key employee licenses. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order regarding the issuance of temporary licenses for 2 principals and 6 key employees. I ask that the board consider the order approving these licenses.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the issuance of temporary principal and key employee credentials as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
In addition, there are gaming permits and non-gaming registrations. Prior to this meeting, the Bureau of Licensing provided you with a list of 660 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted temporary or full occupation permits and 177 individuals to whom the Bureau has granted registrations under the authority delegated to the Bureau of Licensing. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the order.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the issuance of gaming employee occupation permits and non-gaming employee registrations as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Also for your consideration, there are recommendations of denial for 7 gaming employee applicants and 3 non-gaming employee applicants. In each case, the applicant was notified that he or she was being recommended for denial and failed to request a hearing within the specified time period. The Bureau of Licensing has provided you with orders addressing the applicants who the Office of Enforcement Counsel has recommended for denial. I ask that the board consider a motion approving the denials.
Enforcement Council continues to request denial in each instance.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the gaming and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next for your consideration are withdrawal requests for key gaming and non-gaming employees. In each case, the license permit or registration is no longer required. For today's meeting, I've provided the board with a list of 1 key, 19 gaming, and 7 non-gaming employee withdrawals for approval. I ask that the board consider the orders approving the list of withdrawals.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the withdrawal of key, gaming, and non-gaming employee applications as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Next, we have an order to certify TN Ward Company. I ask that the board consider the order approving this gaming service provider for certification.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the applications for gaming service provider certification as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Finally, for your consideration are gaming service provider registrations. The Bureau of Licensing provided you with an order and an attached list of 2 registered gaming service provider applicants. I ask that the board consider the order registering these gaming service providers.
Enforcement Council has no objection.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the applications for gaming service provider registration as described by the Bureau of Licensing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
That concludes the matters of the Bureau of Licensing.
Thank you, Susan. Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Office of Enforcement Counsel will present 15 matters today for the board's consideration, consisting of 2 consent agreements, 2 revocations, 3 suspensions, and 8 involuntary exclusions. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 1 licensee Chester Downs Marina LLC, doing business as Harris, Philadelphia. The consent agreement will be presented by Assistant Enforcement Counsel Benjamin Farrell. Representatives for Harris are present, and at this time I would request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record, and that anyone not here as an attorney please stand and be sworn.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Morning.
Members of the board. Bill Downey, DOWNEY, with Fox Rothschild on behalf of Harris, Philadelphia. To my left is Chris Albrecht, Senior Vice President and GM of Harris, Philadelphia, and to his left, Lynn Hughes, Vice President and Chief Legal Officer.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Benjamin Farrell, F-E-R-R-E-L-L, Assistant Enforcement Counsel for the Office of Enforcement Counsel. This consent agreement between OEC and Harris, Philadelphia involves violations of the Act, board regulations, and Harris, Philadelphia's compulsive and problem gambling plan regarding a self-exclusion violation. On July 27th of 2017, Harris, Philadelphia notified the Bureau of Casino Compliance of a self-excluded patron who entered the gaming floor, gamed, and cashed a personal check. A review of the matter revealed that the self-excluded patron entered the gaming floor through the 4th floor entrance and first gamed at a slot machine for approximately 40 minutes. Subsequently, the self-excluded patron proceeded to the main cage and attempted to redeem a total rewards voucher which belonged to another individual. The cashier informed the self-excluded patron that the voucher could not be redeemed without identification. The self-excluded patron then went to her vehicle and retrieved her identification. The self-excluded patron re-entered the gaming floor and proceeded to the main cage. The cashier informed the self-excluded patron that the voucher could not be redeemed because the voucher belonged to another individual. The self-excluded patron then wrote a check for $140 to be cashed. The cashier scanned the self-excluded patron's identification but failed to notice a system alert which indicated that the self-excluded patron was on the self-exclusion list. The cashier then cashed the self-excluded patron's check. Afterwards, the self-excluded patron gamed at 4 different slot machines for approximately 1 hour and 6 minutes. The self-excluded patron returned to the main cage and received a free slot pay coupon from the cashier. The self-excluded patron then gamed another slot machine for approximately 10 minutes. The self-excluded patron then redeemed a $1 voucher at the main cage and returned to the gaming floor and gamed at 2 slot machines for a total of 32 minutes. The self-excluded patron then proceeded to the casino credit office and attempted to receive casino credit. The credit office employee checked the self-excluded patron's identification and determined that the patron was on the self-exclusion list. The credit employee notified Harris, Philadelphia Surveillance and Security and PSP. PSP charged the self-excluded patron with 1 count of defiant trespass. Harris, Philadelphia permanently evicted the self-excluded patron. The self-excluded patron was on the gaming floor for approximately 3 hours and 47 minutes, where she gamed for approximately 2 hours and 28 minutes. Under the terms of the consent agreement, Harris, Philadelphia has agreed to pay a civil penalty of $10,000 along with a $2,500 administrative fee. At this time, OEC requests the board approve this consent agreement.
Questions or comments from Hara?
Mr. Chairman, we concur in the recitation of the facts provided by OEC with one clarification. The second approach to the window, to the cage, was actually dealt with by a second employee who had, in fairness, observed the first transactions and knew that that person had a check cashed, but it was a second employee.
I see. Any questions or comments from the board in this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Chester Downs and Marina LLC as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted. Thanks for coming.
Next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is a consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Category 1 licensee Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc., doing business as Parks Casino. The consent agreement will be presented by Deputy Chief Enforcement Counsel Dustin Miller. Representatives for Parks are present. And at this time, I would request that those individuals introduce themselves for the record and that anyone not here as an attorney please stand and be sworn.
Good afternoon, Brian Schroeder, Vice President of Regulatory Affairs, SCHROEDER. I have with me Steve Fahn, PFANN, Assistant Director of Table Games.
Good morning. Dustin Miller on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. This consent agreement arises from an incident that occurred on March 21st, 2017, Parks Casino, whereby during the play of blackjack, a patron spilled his drink on a gold-backed Queen of Diamonds playing card and a gold-backed Three of Diamonds playing card. The dealer at the blackjack table attempted to clean up the spilled drink, notified a lead supervisor, and continued with the blackjack hand. Subsequently, the lead supervisor came to the table and replaced the damaged cards with a gold-backed Jack of Diamonds and a gold-backed Three of Diamonds. The lead supervisor properly displayed both sets of cards for the surveillance department, but Parks Casino was unable to provide verification that the surveillance department had been notified of the damaged cards. In any event, the error was not discovered. Blackjack play continued at the blackjack table with an extra Jack of Diamonds in the deck and with one less Queen of Diamonds in the deck from 8:39 p.m. on March 21st, 2017 until the deck was retired from play at 3:53 a.m. on March 22nd, 2017. Approximately 420 rounds were played at the blackjack table with the deck in question. The error was discovered by the Parks Casino Security Department as it conducted an inspection of the replacement deck. As a result, the Parks Casino Surveillance Department was notified, and they in turn notified the Board's Bureau of Casino Compliance of the error on March 24, 2017. Board regulations and Parks Casino's approved internal controls provide the proper procedure for the replacement of damaged playing cards and also the requirements for the contents of a deck of cards approved for table games play. The terms of this agreement include a provision that Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc. shall reinforce existing policies to minimize the opportunity for similar incidents like this to occur in the future. Further, Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc. shall pay a total fine of $10,000 and an administrative fee of $2,500. The fine and administrative fee shall be paid within 5 days of the consent agreement being approved by the Board. Counsel for Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc. is in attendance today to answer any questions you may have. Otherwise, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asks that the Board entertain a motion to approve this consent agreement.
Comments?
Chairman and Commissioners, I would quickly like to discuss a remedial measure we put in place. I was here, I believe, 3 months ago for an incident that also occurred in table games operations. Both that incident and this incident happened over a year ago. Because of those two incidents, Table Games Management put in a refresher course for our supervisors. It was designed to handle the basic machinations of table games, dealing, shuffling, replacing cards that happen every day, but due to the amount of transactions that occur, there's a certain complacency that we've noticed. And because of that, we do this refresher course, and we hope that refresher course eliminates or substantially reduces errors like this in the future. And that's all I have right now. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the Board on this matter? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the consent agreement between the Office of Enforcement Counsel and Greenwood Gaming and Entertainment, Inc., as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted. Thanks for coming.
The next 5 matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed complaints seeking the revocation of 1 gaming employee occupation permit and 1 non-gaming registration, and the suspension of 3 non-gaming employee registrations, which were issued by the Board. Each complaint has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in each complaint. The person named in each complaint failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, the facts in each complaint are deemed admitted, all filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, we'll provide a brief summary of the facts and request the appropriate Board action.
Good morning, Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for revocation involving Demetrius Davis. Mr. Davis was hired as an EBS attendant at Parks Casino and registered as a non-gaming employee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an enforcement complaint on February 1st, 2018 to revoke Mr. Davis's non-gaming employee registration after he was convicted of sale of a firearm to an ineligible transferee, a felony of the 3rd degree, on January 11th, 2018. Although licensed, Mr. Davis never started work at any casino in Pennsylvania. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asks that the Board consider a motion to revoke Demetrius Davis's non-gaming employee registration.
Thank you. Questions or comments from the Board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Board approve the revocation of Demetrius Davis's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Ashley Gabriel, Gabrielle, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next on the agenda for the board's consideration is a complaint seeking the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to Gianna Furia. On November 7, 2017, in concert with others, with intent to commit a crime therein, Ms. Furia unlawfully entered a building or occupied structure belonging to another individual at or near 1013 South 12th Street in Philadelphia. She was arrested and charged with criminal conspiracy, a felony graded offense, burglary, a felony graded offense, criminal trespass, break into structure, a felony graded offense, and criminal mischief. The charges are pending. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to Gianna Furia.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Gianna for non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the board. Sarah Kolesar, Kolesar, Assistant Enforcement Counsel with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the revocation of the gaming employee permit issued to Robert Henderson for failing to comply with a special statement of conditions of licensure that required him to abide by all conditions of the State of Maryland STEP program, which he entered into as a result of misdemeanor criminal charges, and provide any documentation relating to said criminal charges. Mr. Henderson has not provided any additional documentation regarding the criminal charges, has not completed the STEP program, and has violated the terms of his probation by failing to appear. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board revoke the gaming employee permit issued to Mr. Henderson.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the revocation of Robert Henderson's gaming employee occupation permit as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The next matter on the agenda for the board's consideration is the suspension of the non-gaming employee registration issued to James Satter for being arrested and criminally charged with 2 felony offenses that stem from a domestic incident where Mr. Satter assaulted and threatened his mother. Mr. Satter pled guilty to misdemeanor simple assault and misdemeanor terroristic threats and was sentenced to 2 years probation. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board suspend the non-gaming employee registration issued to Mr. Satter.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the suspension of James Satter's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for suspension involving Albert Ramirez. Mr. Ramirez was employed as a food and beverage attendant at Parks Casino and registered as a non-gaming employee. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed an enforcement complaint on October 6, 2017 to suspend Mr. Ramirez's non-gaming employee registration after an arrest warrant was issued for his arrest after he failed to appear in the Court of Common Pleas of Bucks County for formal arraignment to address his arrest for driving under the influence, possession of a small amount of marijuana, and related charges. Mr. Ramirez was terminated from his employment at Parks Casino on February 27, 2017 for attendance issues. Based on the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked the board to consider the suspension of Albert Ramirez's non-gaming employee registration.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the suspension of Albert Ramirez's non-gaming employee registration as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion's adopted.
The remaining matters on the agenda consist of enforcement actions in which the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed petitions seeking the involuntary exclusion of individuals whose presence in a licensed facility are inimical to the interests of the Commonwealth and their licensed gaming therein. In each instance, the petition for exclusion has been filed with the Board's Office of Hearings and Appeal and properly served upon the individual named in each petition. The individual named in each petition failed to respond within 30 days as required by Board regulation. As a result, the Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a request for default judgment in each instance and properly served the same upon each named individual. Therefore, all facts in each petition are deemed admitted, all filed documents have been provided to the Board, and the matters are presently ripe for the Board's consideration. In each instance, if the Board orders a proposed exclusion, each individual's photo, Personal identifiers and a summary of their inimical conduct will be placed on the board's public website.
The next matter for consideration is a petition to place Thomas Daniels on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On December 23, 2017, Mr. Daniels physically assaulted a female patron while patronizing Harris, Philadelphia. The Chester Police Department arrested and charged Mr. Daniels with 1 count of misdemeanor simple assault and 3 summary offenses. On March 20, 2018, a preliminary hearing was held. At that preliminary hearing, Mr. Daniels pled guilty to disorderly conduct and the simple assault. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Mr. Daniels on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Thomas Daniels to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place William Gates on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On November 10, 2017, Mr. Gates punched the display glass of a slot machine while gaming at Harris, Philadelphia. Mr. Gates intentionally damaged the slot machine which temporarily placed it out of order. The Pennsylvania State Police cited Mr. Gates with 1 count of criminal mischief. On December 20, 2017, Mr. Gates pleaded guilty to that charge. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Mr. Gates on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board?
We should identify him as William Gates Sr., I believe, for the record.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of William Gates Sr. to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
The next matter for your consideration is a petition to place Kenneth Hamilton on the board's involuntary exclusion list. On February 25th of 2017, Mr. Hamilton accompanied an underage individual onto the gaming floor at Harris, Philadelphia. While on the gaming floor, Mr. Hamilton stole a patron's jacket and car keys and was involved in an altercation with the Chester Police Department. The Chester PD arrested and criminally charged Mr. Hamilton. On January 24th of 2018, Mr. Hamilton pleaded guilty to theft by unlawful taking and aggravated assault. At this time, OEC requests the board issue an order placing Mr. Hamilton on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Kenneth Hamilton to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Dustin Miller, once again on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. The next matter today is a request for placement on the board's excluded persons list involving Melissa Jo McCloskey. The Office of Enforcement Counsel filed a petition to place Ms. McCloskey on the exclusion list due to an incident that occurred on April 22, 2017. On that date, Ms. McCloskey entered the Rivers Casino parking garage and then left her 12-year-old daughter alone in the vehicle for approximately 1 hour and 54 minutes to engage in gaming activity. A patron reported to security that the girl was unattended in the garage. Ms. McCloskey was issued a 1-year ban by Rivers Casino for her actions. Based upon the foregoing, the Office of Enforcement Counsel asked that the board place Melissa McCloskey on the board's excluded persons list.
Is there any time limitation on that request?
No.
Okay. Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Yeah, before I do, these just drive me crazy. I know the child was 12 years old, but these parents, I mean, get a babysitter, get Xbox, let them play Fortnite. My kid plays Fortnite for hours. So I just don't I can't understand whether it's 12 or 10 or whatever, leave them in the car. Gaming can't be that important. So I doubt if Melissa is listening, but for the next Melissa or Mark or whoever, because we'll have another one of these cases. It blows my mind where they leave their kid in the car to go game, whether it's for a minute or in this particular case, almost 2 hours. With that said, Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Melissa Jo McCloskey to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I further move that Ms. McCloskey be removed from the list after 2 years.
Second.
Thank you.
Automatic.
Automatic, yeah.
Okay. Would you just state that as part of your motion, if you would, again?
Yeah, I further move that Ms. McCloskey be automatically removed from the list after 2 years.
And is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Michael Rowland, ROL, A&D, with the Office of Enforcement Counsel. Next two matters on the agenda arise from the same fact pattern, and each involves a request to place the individual on the involuntary exclusion list. In October 2017, the Bureau of Casino Compliance was notified by Sands Surveillance that 2 adult males were searching through unlocked cars in the parking garage at Sands Casino. Tyrone Wint and Ishia Hicks were observed attempting to gain access to multiple cars and were successful on at least one occasion. The owner of the vehicle was located and identified and advised that a receipt and a key were missing from the car. The receipt was found on Tyrone Wint. Mr. Wint was criminally charged by the Bethlehem Police Department with theft from a motor vehicle and entered a guilty plea to the charge. Mr. Hicks was criminally charged with conspiracy to commit theft from a motor vehicle and possession of drug paraphernalia, and his charges remain pending. The matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Ishia Hicks on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move the board approve the addition of Ishia Hicks to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion's adopted.
And the matter is now before the board to consider the placement of Tyrone Wint on the board's involuntary exclusion list.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Tyrone Wint to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Ashley Gabriel on behalf of the Office of Enforcement Counsel. I'll address the final 2 matters. The next 2 matters on the agenda for the board's consideration are petitions for the exclusion of Tyreek Ibrahim and Celestine Washington. As the exclusion requests arise from the same set of facts, I will provide the facts giving rise to the requests and then separately request the exclusion of each individual. On Friday, September 8, 2017, at Parks Casino in Bensalem, PA, Ms. Washington unlawfully entered another person's vehicle in the Parks parking lot through a broken window. She entered the vehicle, closed the door, and sat inside for approximately 7 minutes. Mr. Ibrahim roamed the parking lot as a lookout for Ms. Washington while she committed the break-in. Once she exited the vehicle, Ms. Washington and Mr. Ibrahim proceeded to Parks Casino to engage in gaming activity. When the owner of the vehicle returned to his car, he noticed that his car had been broken into and reported to security staff that a camera, CDs, Bluetooth speaker, coins, and 2 drills were missing from his vehicle. According to the victim, the value of the missing items totaled approximately $860. Mr. Ibrahim and Ms. Washington were found playing at slot machines inside of Parks and arrested. Additionally, Ms. Washington is being excluded for incidents of misconduct that occurred on June 21, 2014, while she was on Sugar House Casino's gaming floor. Ms. Washington stole a cigarette case containing a cell phone, ID, and credit cards belonging to another patron. When confronted by Sugar House staff, Ms. Washington admitted to the theft, returned the items, and was issued a permanent eviction from Sugar House. At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Tyreek Ibrahim.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Tyreek Ibrahim to the PGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Celestine and Washington.
Sorry. Could you repeat that for a second? I'm sorry.
At this time, the Office of Enforcement Counsel requests that the board exclude Celestine and Washington.
Any questions or comments from the board? May I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board approve the addition of Celestine Washington to the BGCB involuntary exclusion list as described by the Office of Enforcement Counsel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion's adopted.
Thank you. That concludes our business.
Thank you. That concludes today's meeting. Our next public session will be held on Wednesday, May 30th at 10 a.m. in this room. May I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The motion is adjourned. Thank you all for your time and your attendance. Thank you.